Good evening! How are you, my holy sisters and brothers? That was Modi Steinmetz singing his hit song, Haneshama Bekir Bi. I've played it a bunch of times. It's always good. How are you doing? It's great to be with you. Let's light up the darkness. And who is with us as we get it going on a Thursday evening? We're excited. It's almost Shabbos. Why does Facebook do that to me? Sometimes it won't show me the comments, so I have to reload it. Okay, hold on. Coming. I saw Lynn in North Texas is with us on the YouTube side. Welcome, Lynn. Always good to have you. There we go. And Stephen in New Hampshire, James in Indianapolis, Yehudit in Florence, South Carolina, Bill in Berkeley, Tom says shalom, Sharon in Lebanon, Paul in Chicago, Bella says shalom, Paul in the Great Northwest, Guy in Dayton, Ohio, Nancy in Southern Pines, North Carolina, Rebecca in LA, and she says, I really think you should have a music hour sometime. You play such beautiful music. Interesting idea. Very interesting idea. All right, before we get into our daf, I just wanted to share a really beautiful teaching. This is from Rabbi Avraham Tewrski's book, Rabbi Dr. Avraham Tewrski's book, Living Each Day, which I think has been republished. He just has a teaching or two teachings for every day of the calendar, which you can use sort of for 5 years or 6 years. It's sort of arranged by the sort of Gregorian calendar as well as the Hebrew calendar. Mine is from 1998 to 2003, but it doesn't matter. Today is the 30th day of the Hebrew month of Sivan, so we say Chodesh Tov. Sometimes we have a one-day Rosh Chodesh celebration. Sometimes it's a two-day Rosh Chodesh. Right now we're in a two-day Rosh Chodesh celebration. Tomorrow is actually the first day of the Hebrew month of Tammuz, but it's a two-day Rosh Chodesh. It's just one of the particularities of the Hebrew calendar that we do that. This book, by the way, is available on Amazon, Living Each Day. So he says from the Hallel on Psalm 116, so that's part of the Hallel that we recite when there's a Rosh Chodesh or the festivals as part of our morning service, morning davening. And so it's Psalm 116. It says, I thank you, O God, that I am your servant. Yes, your servant, the son of your handmaid. You have loosened my bonds, right? So a handmaid is essentially a female slave. And we're saying I'm the son of a slave and I am a slave. Right? I am a servant, but a servant of Hashem, right? And so Rabbi Tewrski says, this verse expresses two important concepts. First, we acknowledge our gratitude to our ancestors for conveying to us the teachings of Torah that enable us to fulfill our mission in life. Secondly, and contrary to popular opinion, Torah, all the halachas, all these laws which bind us, right? We can only eat kosher, and we don't drive on Shabbos, and we don't turn lights on and off on Shabbos, and we don't cook on Shabbos, and we must say a blessing before and after we eat, etc. You might think that, oh, it's so many requirements, it sort of limits me, and it restricts my life. He says, contrary to popular opinion, Torah is not restrictive. Indeed, Torah provides the possibility of true freedom. There is no enslavement that is as absolute as that of a person who is under the domination of his passions and internal drives. Unless a person disciplines himself and develops self-mastery, and Rabbi Dr. Avraham Tewrski was a psychiatrist, very well versed in addiction. He was a specialist in treating people with addiction issues. And he says, unless a person disciplines himself and develops self-mastery, he becomes a pawn at the mercy of his lust, greed, and hunger. Just as an addict is subject to the unrelenting dictatorship of alcohol and drugs, so does the undisciplined individual eventually lose all freedom of choice. Torah teaches restraint, discipline, and self-mastery, thereby actually loosening the bonds, as the verse from Psalm 116 says. and enables the person to exercise true freedom of choice. That's from Scripture. Then he does one from our sages, and this is from Path of the Just. A person who does not use his intelligence to avoid that which is harmful to his soul is lower than an animal or beast. For the latter, the animal or the beast, instinctively protect themselves and will flee from anything that they perceive as dangerous. And now Rabbi Tewrski says, animals do not indulge in excesses. In their natural habitat, they don't become obese, and they don't get addicted to foods that are bad for them in too much quantity. So why is indulgence to excess restricted to humans? And the answer is that each biological drive has its endpoint at which it is satisfied. Man, in addition to biological drives, also has a craving for spirituality, a need for closeness to God. This is an infinite craving, which can never be fully satisfied. But when a person does not recognize this need, and he does not identify his need for spirituality as what it is, so he may try to satisfy this undefined need by those methods that have provided him with some pleasure. So he will therefore eat, drink, or indulge in physical pleasures in a futile attempt to satisfy spiritual cravings. Since none of these methods can fill the spiritual void, he futilely continues to indulge, achieving nothing but frustration and eventually much worse, since addictions can kill you. For a person to be happy, his spiritual needs must be recognized and appropriately addressed. What a beautiful and important and forever relevant teaching from Rabbi Dr. Avraham Tewrski. Okay, let's get into today's daf. This is daf Samech, page 60, here in Tractate Yoma, the 6th volume of the Talmud. We're working our way through chapter 5, and today we'll be discussing the 6th Mishnah of chapter 5. Generally speaking, we're working our way through the day of Yom Kippur, as it was observed when the temple was standing and the high priest could perform the avodah, the divine service of the high priest that was required of him on Yom Kippur on behalf of himself, his family, his fellow priests, and the entire Jewish nation. Mishnah number 6. Here in chapter 5, each action performed in the context of the service of Yom Kippur, stated in the Mishnah, as in the Torah, is listed in order. As I said, we've been working our way through the day, right? So we started at the beginning of the tractate that he sequestered himself in the temple compound for the 7 days. Then we got into the day of Yom Kippur itself. He dressed in a certain way. He immersed himself in a certain way. He performed the obligations, the daily obligations that the priests do on every other day of the year. Then he immersed again. He donned the white garments that only the high priest wears on Yom Kippur, the special white garments. Then he slaughtered the bull. He slaughtered the goat. He took the incense into the Holy of Holies with the coal pan. He made the cloud of incense. He came out. He took the blood of the bull. He went in. He sprinkled. He came out. He took the blood of the goat. He went in. He sprinkled. He came out. He sprinkled of the bull on the sanctuary curtain. Then the blood of the goat on the sanctuary curtain. Then he mixed those bloods together, and he purified the incense altar, which is in the sanctuary. And then what was left over of that blood went outside the sanctuary, and it was deposited at the base of the main altar where offerings are brought in the temple courtyard. And that blood, as we learned in the last 2 days, went down into the special drainage system that cleaned the courtyard of the temple, and it was sold to farmers in the Kidron Valley. So that's where we are in our progress through Yom Kippur. And now our Mishnah here in the middle of the book, or toward the end of the book, there are 88 pages in this book, and we're on page 60. it says that each action performed in the context of the service of Yom Kippur that's stated in the Mishnah as in the Torah is listed in order. So he has to do these things in a very specific order. If the high priest performed one of the actions before another, meaning out of order, he has done nothing. Whatever he did doesn't count. He's going to have to do that action again. If he did it out of its time, right, before he was supposed to do something else in the specified order, then this thing that he did out of order, it's as if he didn't do it. He has done nothing. If he performed the sprinkling of the blood of the goat before the sprinkling of the blood of the bull, he must repeat the action and sprinkle the blood of the goat after sprinkling the blood of the bull, so that the actions are performed in the proper order. Another example, and if the blood spills before he completed the presentations that were sprinkled inside the Holy of Holies, he must slaughter another bull or goat and bring other blood and then repeat all the services from the beginning inside the Holy of Holies. Because remember, it's not just any blood that he's bringing, and it's not just any blood of that bull or of that goat. That animal might still be out there, and it would be quite easy to collect more blood from the Yom Kippur bull or the Yom Kippur goat. But it's only the lifeblood that can be used for this atonement ceremony where he sprinkles the blood in the Holy of Holies or in the sanctuary. And if he drops that vessel by mistake, now he no longer has the lifeblood to use. He's going to have to actually go and slaughter another animal. So he's got to, so one thing is if he does part of the service out of order. Another is if he can't complete a part of the service because something went wrong, like he dropped that vessel with the special lifeblood in it. And similarly, if the blood spills before he finishes the presentations in the sanctuary, he must begin the service in the sanctuary from the beginning. And likewise with regard to the sprinkling of blood on the golden altar. But these are, at least there is sort of punctuation. There's the service in the Holy of Holies. There's the sprinkling that's done at the front of the sanctuary toward the curtain that divides the sanctuary from the Holy of Holies. And there's the sprinkling that's done on the golden altar. If he messes up, let's say the sprinkling of the golden altar, okay, he doesn't have to go and repeat all of what came before, the sprinkling in the sanctuary, and before that, the sprinkling of the Holy of Holies. So it's like there are chapters. He has, if he gets interrupted in the middle of one of these chapters, okay, he has to start that chapter over, but he doesn't have to start the whole day over. Since they are each acts of atonement in and of themselves, there is no need to repeat the service of the entire day from the beginning. Rather, he need only repeat the specific element that he failed to complete. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon say, from the place that he interrupted that particular service when the blood spilled, there he resumes performance of that service. In their opinion, each individual sprinkling in each of these services is an act in and of itself, and there is no need to repeat that which he has already done. So they disagree with the anonymous opinion of the Mishnah, which just says you have to start that, that element of the service over again, the sprinkling. They say, well, if he sprinkled 4 times and then he dropped the blood, okay, the 4 that he did count, and then when he comes back, he just has to do the remaining 4, right? Because there's 8 total, 1 up and 4 and 7 down. That's the Mishnah. Now we get into the Gemara. The sages taught each action performed in the context of the service of Yom Kippur, stated in the Torah, is listed in order. If the high priest performed one of the actions before another, he has done nothing. Rabbi Yehuda said, when does this apply? It applies to those actions performed in white garments inside the sanctuary. For example, burning the incense and sprinkling the blood, which are the essential services of the day. However, with regard to those actions performed in white garments outside, meaning in the temple courtyard, such as the lottery and the confession, if he performed one action before another, what he did is done, and he need not repeat the rite. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's only those actions when he's wearing the white garments that are only worn by the high priest on Yom Kippur, and when he's inside, either in the sanctuary or even further inside in the Holy of Holies. But even if he's wearing the white garments when he's doing something, but he's doing it outside, If he does it out of order, what is done is done, and he doesn't have to repeat it. In contrast, Rabbi Nehemiah says, in what case is this statement said that the order is indispensable? It is said with regard to actions performed in white garments, period, whether inside or outside the sanctuary. However, with regard to those actions performed in golden garments outside the sanctuary, the regular temple service and additional services, right? There's a daily offering that's brought every day, including Yom Kippur. The high priest does that himself on Yom Kippur, but when he's performing the daily service, that is the same as the daily service done every day, he's not dressed in those white garments. That's why he has to change his clothes a bunch of times on Yom Kippur. When he's doing the normal actions of the high priest or of an ordinary priest, he's wearing the golden garments, the special garments of the high priest. If he does those out of order, that doesn't matter. What's done is done. But according to Rabbi Nehemiah, anytime he's wearing the special white garments of Yom Kippur, everything that he does has to be done in a specific order. And if something's done out of order, he has done nothing. And wait a minute. Rabbi Yochanan said, and both of them, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nehemiah, derived their opinions from the same verse, Leviticus 16:34. And this shall be an everlasting statute to you, to make atonement for the children of Israel for all their sins once a year. Right? To make atonement for the children of Israel. So this is probably specifically directed at Aaron and whoever is the high priest that succeed Aaron, right? This is a specific statute that the high priest must do, and it is an everlasting statute to make the atonement for the children of Israel for all their sins once a year. Rabbi Yehuda maintains that this verse is referring to the place where atonement is achieved once a year, namely the Holy of Holies. It's the only time that we use the Holy of Holies. A repairman may go in there under very special circumstances, as we've discussed. If a repair needs to be made in the Holy of Holies, he drops in from the ceiling in a box on a rope with blinders on. Okay, they'll do maintenance if it's necessary to be done. But in terms of the ritual performed in the Holy of Holies, only the high priest enters there only once a year. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, where is atonement made once a year? In the Holy of Holies. So it's only the stuff that's done in the Holy of Holies and related to the Holy of Holies. So what's in the sanctuary, if any of those things are done out of order, okay, then he's done nothing. But anything outside the sanctuary, even if he's wearing the white clothes, that's not at such a high level of perfection. And if something is done out of order, what's done is done. It would be better to do it in the right order, but if something's done out of order, it's done. And Rabbi Nehemiah maintains that the verse is referring to the actions through which atonement is achieved once a year, meaning both the place and the garments. Consequently, in the opinion of Rabbi Nehemiah, the order for all actions performed in white clothes is indispensable. Right? So what's the difference between them is things that the high priest does while wearing the white garments and standing outside the sanctuary, like, after he makes the slaughter of the animal and then he recites the confession, right? So if he does that out of order, according to Rabbi Nehemiah, he's done nothing and he has to repeat those actions. And the Gemara asks, is that to say that according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, the word place is written in our verse, Leviticus 16:34, but the verse does not say place. The verse merely states once a year, which apparently is referring to the order of the service in general, but not to what specific place it's performed in. So rather, the Gemara retracts the previous explanation in favor of the following. This is the reasoning of Rabbi Yehuda. So we're gonna understand what Rabbi Yehuda is saying in a little bit different way. In Leviticus 16:34, the word this, right? V'chaisa zois, right? Zion Aleph Taf, zois, this, right? What does it mean? It is written this in Leviticus 16:34, which is a term of restriction and limitation. It means that it actually omits other things from the meaning of this verse. In what does it omit? How does it restrict the verse? This, which is a term of restriction and limitation, and it is written once a year. Another term of restriction. One restriction comes to exclude, right? It says, this is the statute, right? And this shall be an everlasting statute to you, this law, to make atonement for the children of Israel for all their sins once a year. And these terms, this and once, are restrictive terms. So one restriction comes to exclude actions that are performed in the white garments outside the sanctuary, meaning that they are not indispensable. And one restriction comes to exclude actions performed in the gold garments. So those are not included in the verse, and this shall be an eternal statute, right? It's not the whole day is an eternal statute. What is an eternal statute? That you shall do these very specific actions of atonement, bringing the blood and the incense and the blood and doing what you do in the Holy of Holies, and by extension in the sanctuary where you're facing the Holy of Holies. But once you're outside, it would seem like that's not part of this is the eternal statute of what you do once a year. And how does Rabbi Nehemiah interpret these two restricting expressions? Because he's saying, well, as long as you're wearing the white garments, it is part of this eternal statute, even if you're standing outside the sanctuary. So what does Rabbi Nehemiah do with these two restrictive terms that limit what the verse applies to? Where is it? In his opinion, one of the restrictions comes to exclude actions performed in the gold garments. So he would agree with Rabbi Yehuda on that. And one restriction comes to exclude the remainders of blood that are poured at the base of the altar, meaning that these are not indispensable. So he would say that once you've sprinkled on the inner altar in the sanctuary that mixture of the bull and the goat's blood, okay, so that blood is done. It's done, right? It's not needed for anything anymore. You have to, get rid of it in a dignified way, and that's why they're going to spill it on the base of the altar, and it's going to go out toward the Kidron River. But if you did that action of spilling those remnants on the altar out of order, out of the designated order, so that's okay. What's done is done. You wouldn't have to repeat that action because it's not an indispensable part of the order of the day described in Exodus 16:34 as this shall be an eternal statute for you. Right? So if the high priest performed a service that is supposed to come after the spilling of the blood, and he does it too early, the service is valid, despite the fact that the spilling of those remnants on the base of the outer altar is performed in white garments. And the Gemara asks, well, if that is excluded from this is an eternal statute for you, so then what does Rabbi Yehuda do? And what does Rabbi Yehuda maintain with regard to the remainders of the blood? And the Gemara answers, in Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, if the other actions performed outside are indispensable, this too is indispensable. And if the other acts performed outside are not indispensable, then the remainders are also not indispensable. He doesn't need a separate explanation within that verse or separate exclusion within the verse to distinguish between some of the acts done outside the sanctuary and other acts done outside the sanctuary. According to Rabbi Yehuda, everything done outside the sanctuary is not an indispensable part of the Yom Kippur day. That if you do it such that if you do it out of order, you have not done anything, according to our Mishna. In proof that Rabbi Yehuda maintains that pouring the remnants of the blood of the bull and goat mixture is no different from the sprinkling of the blood, the Gemara cites a Baraisa that is referring to a case where the pouring of the remainders of the blood is entirely omitted. So it's clearly not that important, as it was taught in a Baraisa. And when he has finished atoning for the sacred place, that's Leviticus 16:20, and the verse indicates that if he performed the atonement, he has finished the order of the service. And if he did not perform the atonement, he is not finished. This is the statement of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yehuda said to Rabbi Akiva, why do we not say that if he finished sprinkling all of the blood, he has performed atonement? And if he did not finish, he has not performed atonement. This would indicate that if one of the presentations is lacking, it is as though he did nothing, right? So the difference between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yehuda, right? Rabbi Akiva says, well, did he perform the atonement or not? Rabbi Yehuda is saying, well, how do we know if he performed the atonement? According to Rabbi Yehuda, he has to do all of the sprinklings so that he can be considered to have completed the atonement. And if he completed the atonement, well, then he's done. And if he hasn't completed the atonement and done all of the sprinklings that are part of the atonement, he's not done. And we say in this regard, what is the practical difference between them? My Benehu. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi debated what is the difference between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yehuda on this issue in the new Baraisa that we're discussing. One of them said there is a difference between them with regard to the source from which they derive their interpretation. In other words, they agree on the matter of law, they only dispute about what is the source for that law. And the other one said there is a difference between them. There is a practical difference with respect to whether the pouring of the remainders of the blood at the base of the altar is indispensable to the atonement or not. According to Rabbi Akiva, it is not indispensable, right? So according to Rabbi Akiva, okay, well, he did the atoning inside, so it doesn't matter whether he then, in terms of like bringing the remnants of the blood out and spilling them at the base of the altar, okay, it's a respectful way to, dispose of those remnants of blood, but he's already performed the atonement. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda maintains that it is indispensable, that you do have to pour it on the base of the altar, or the atonement is not complete. And the Gemara asks, and did Rabbi Yochanan actually say this? That in Rabbi Nehemiah's opinion, pouring the remainders of blood is not indispensable? But didn't Rabbi Yochanan himself say in Tractate Zevachim on page 111 that Rabbi Nehemiah taught in accordance with the statement of the one who said that the remainders of blood are indispensable? And the Gemara comments, indeed, this is difficult. And it just leaves the issue there. It says, Kasha. Okay, we can't settle this, right? It actually got a little too complicated here, and we couldn't settle this argument, and so the Gemara moves on. Rabbi Hanina said, with regard to the incense that the high priest scooped before the slaughtering of the bull, it is as though he did nothing. Right, because he has to slaughter the bull and then scoop the incense, which he's going to take inside the Holy of Holies. So if he scooped the incense before slaughtering the bull, it is as if he has done nothing. He's going to have to scoop the incense again in the right order. And the Gemara comments, in accordance with whose opinion is this statement? It is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. As if you say, it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Didn't Rabbi Yehuda say that when it is written statute, like this is an eternal statute for you, a term that indicates that no details may be altered, it is written with regard to actions performed in white garments inside the sanctuary, whereas scooping the incense is done outside. The incense that he scoops to bring into the Holy of Holies, he doesn't scoop it from the incense altar that's inside the sanctuary. He scoops these coals, as we learned, about a month ago, from the outer altar, right? From the outer altar where they had several fires burning on Yom Kippur, one purely to create the coals that the high priest will scoop and take into the Holy of Holies with him. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, why would it be that he's done nothing if only the stuff that's done inside the sanctuary or the Holy of Holies has to be done in exactly the right order in his white garments and inside the sanctuary? It should only be according to Rabbi Nehemiah that if he scooped the incense coals before he slaughtered the bull of Yom Kippur, that he has done nothing because he did it out of order, because Rabbi Nehemiah said anything you do in the white garments, whether you're in the sanctuary or out, has to be done in the right order. Right? So Rabbi Hanina said, well, this is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, as if you say it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Didn't he say, when it is written statute, a term that indicates no details may be altered. It is written with regard to actions performed only in white garments and inside the sanctuary, but the scooping of incense is done outside. But the Gemara rejects this claim. Even if you say that Rabbi Hanina holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, it is possible that in his opinion, scooping the incense for the purpose of being taken inside is considered like an action that was actually performed inside. And the Gemara raises a difficulty, meaning that even though you scoop those coals out in the courtyard, which is outside the sanctuary, since you scoop them in order to bring them into the Holy of Holies, it's like you performed an action inside. It's so obviously linked to what you do inside. You can't make the cloud of incense in the Holy of Holies if you don't have the coals to do it with. So scooping the coals is just a preliminary and indispensably connected part of bringing the incense, so that even though it was done outside, if you did it out of order, it will throw everything off. Even according to Rabbi Yehuda, is what's being argued now. But the Gemara raises a difficulty. We learned in the Mishna, and I'm almost done, so get your questions and comments in. The Gemara raises a difficulty. We learned in the Mishna that if the blood spills before the high priest completed the presentations that were sprinkled inside the Holy of Holies, he must slaughter another bull or goat, bring other blood, and then sprinkle again from the beginning inside. And if it is so that an action performed outside the sanctuary for the purpose of a service inside the sanctuary is considered like an action that's actually performed inside, which we're now suggesting, what if scooping the coals for the incense is considered like it was done inside the sanctuary because it's so important, so integral? Well, then slaughtering the bull is also integral. You won't have that lifeblood to bring in to sprinkle in the Holy of Holies. So if it is so that an action performed outside the sanctuary for the purpose of a service inside the sanctuary is considered like an action that's actually performed inside, merely slaughtering the bull and sprinkling the blood again should be insufficient. Instead, the Mishnah should have said that he must return and scoop the incense anew. The fact that the Mishnah did not say this proves that the order of scooping the incense is not indispensable. So the scooping of the incense, which is done outside, it seems that the law is like Rabbi Yehuda. If you did that, what's done is done, even if you did it out of order, because it's not considered an integral, indispensable part of what's going on inside. Right? The Gemara answers, this is no proof, as he is not dealing with the incense. In practice, the high priest must indeed go back and scoop up new incense after slaughtering the bull. And the Mishnah did not mention this detail because it is discussing the issue of the sprinkling of the blood, not the incense service. So just the fact that it was omitted doesn't mean that it was omitted on purpose. It's just that in our discussion, it was talking about another subject. So we can't learn out that because it's left out of that discussion that it was omitted on purpose. Okay, that's what we've got today. So that was not easy. Right? That was not easy. Sometimes, we have to be able to take that dive. I don't always take us there to the really technical arguments where we're trying to understand exactly what is the issue, what are two sages arguing about. In order to understand what they're each saying, sometimes two later sages will disagree on the view of one of them. And then we'll explore that one view as these later two guys are arguing about what this guy said. And when we finally clarify that, then we can go back to the original argument and say, what is different between him and the person that he was originally at odds with or in a difference with? And keeping all that straight is not easy. And that is when we say Talmudic reasoning, that Talmudic sharpens your mind. That's why. But the purpose isn't just to argue things that are difficult. The purpose is to get very precise as we struggle to understand what is God's will for us in every aspect, in every aspect of our lives. There's a correct way to do things, but particularly when we're talking about the Yom Kippur service, where the high priest, every aspect of what he does is choreographed carefully because he's making an atonement for himself, his family, his fellow priests, and the nation. So they have to get it right. Okay, let's go to the questions and comments. Okay. Seraphim Winslow. So then it's implied that addiction to prayer and to spiritual life is admissible. Okay, so what is addiction? I'm going back to, I think I heard Dr. Drew, of all people, say. Addiction is something where you don't have control over it, right? You don't have control. You're doing something that is destructive, that is self-destructive, that has consequences, and that has momentum, which I think he means it's like it's getting worse, right? So somebody who prays every day, I mean, that's not destructive, that's constructive. When you say somebody would be addicted to prayer in a spiritual life, you're saying that it would have to have some kind of negative consequences, right? Like, for instance, he's becoming an ascetic, he's becoming a monk, he's so closed off to the rest of his life and perhaps to the people who depend on him that he's just immersing himself beyond what is called for, beyond what is healthy. So then I would say that is an addiction, right? Because that is not what we're commanded to do. In fact, the life of a monk is something that the sages absolutely reject, right? One person did that, which was the Rashbi, right? Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, because he was on the run from the Roman government, and he ended up in a cave with his son for 12 years, sort of studying mysticism, and came out with the Zohar. But, that was special circumstances. And generally speaking, Judaism is very much a religion concerned with living it out in the world. So there are times for prayer, there are times for eating, there are times for work, there are times for fun, there are times for family, there are times, there's a time and a place for everything. So if it's becoming, if you're overdoing it, that means that you're omitting your obligations in these other areas. So the addiction to one part of life of faith to the exclusion of the other parts, I think, would be an addiction. And that's not good. So Sharon, please, please, please consider the song Shabbos from our mutual friend Sam Glazer for tomorrow's session. It so gets one into the Shabbos mood. Okay. I'm going to have to see if I can reach out to Sam and get his permission. But let me try and make that happen. Okay. Sam Glazer's Shabbos. I don't think I know his version. We'll check that out. See what I can do. No promises. Yosef, I think you answered the question I was going to ask tonight. If a particular part of the service needed repeating, only that part of the service was to be redone and not the entire day. Correct. And then what they're debating is how far back do you have to go, right? So one thing that the anonymous Mishna seemed to say, that if, for example, this vessel that you're using to carry around the blood in, if you spilled it in the middle of the sprinklings, it seems that you have to go, get blood again. So you're going to have to slaughter an animal again. That means you're going to have to bring incense again. We just learned that. And then you're going to sprinkle again. It would seem you have to do all the sprinklings again. But it was Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon who say, no, every sprinkling is its own sprinkling. You're just going to have to pick it up again with the sprinklings that you haven't done yet. So if you sprinkled 3 times, you owe 5 more. You just do those 5, not all 8. Tom, how and when would they have discovered that there were repairs needed inside the Holy of Holies? Wouldn't the high priest have had more on his mind than looking around to see what needed fixing? Great question. So I don't know for sure, but my guess would be that since maintenance was done in the Holy of Holies, part of that maintenance would be inspection, right? So on some kind of a schedule, I don't know what, once a year, once every 10 years, I don't know what the schedule was, but from time to time, they would have to do an inspection to see if anything needed fixing and then fix it, right? So because you're right, no way is the high priest going to notice those. He's got a lot on his mind, and not only that, he's bringing in a coal pan and this powdery incense that's going to make a cloud in there. He's not going to see very much what's going on in the Holy of Holies. Sharon, Zot, this, in the feminine form. What specifically is zot in reference to, or zois, right, in the more Ashkenaz pronunciation? There must be something in particular that the feminine noun is referring to. And this shall be an everlasting statute. That's what it's referring to. V'chaisa zois lachem lechukas. Right? So it will be to you an everlasting statute. Right? And so it's a hook, or in this case a chukas, that must be the feminine word, right? And a hok is a specific kind of law that is not rational, meaning like we understand why there's a law that says do not murder. Like it just makes instinctive sense to us. But we don't understand why it is that you can't eat shellfish if you're a Jew and you can't eat pork if you're a Jew. There's not a rational reason for that. If you've ever been told, oh, in the ancient times, they knew that swine was dangerous and so God gave this law that, people wouldn't eat dangerous foods for their health. Wrong. False. That's not why we don't eat pork. I bet pork is really good. But what can I do? My Father in heaven said, don't eat it. It's just something that God said to do, and so we do it. It doesn't have that rational basis. And so that's the difference between mishpatim, laws that have that rational basis, and hukim, right? Or hukos, I guess. These laws that are, isn't it hukim? Sharon, you let me know. These laws that are supra-rational. Okay, Tom, did the high priest have assistants to remind him of the correct order? Yes and no. Not while he's in the sanctuary or in the Holy of Holies, right? So we saw that's part of the law, that no one can go in with him in the Holy of Holies. And not only that, when he's in the Holy of Holies, no one can even be in the sanctuary. But in front of the sanctuary, right, near the outer altar where the slaughtering is done, etc., definitely. He's got people helping him, and the deputy high priest is walking around with him. And I'm sure that they're probably reminding him, or if he has any questions, they're certainly there to answer. So for sure, he's got help anytime that it's not commanded that he be alone. Okay, I think that's probably it, but Nina had to go out, so let me just double check. Are there any other questions? Can't just reload. I have to go back, reload the main page, and then click on it again. Oh, welcome Benedito from Brazil. Always great to have people in from other continents. Okay, no, that seems to be it. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow at the regular Friday time, which is noon Pacific. By the way, if you like this shirt, I Don't Roll on Shabbos, it's available along with all the other interesting, comical, inspiring t-shirts, pillows, blankets, towels, pillows, all kinds of great sweatshirts, bags, all kinds of cool stuff in the store, shop.accidentaltalmudist.org. It supports our nonprofit. And this is all great stuff, sure to start a conversation and good quality too. Have a great night. Oh, and if you're on TikTok, don't forget to follow me on TikTok at yourpalsal613, where I've started my TikTok journey. I'm going to be personally telling the 72 greatest Jewish jokes of all time. If you're not on TikTok, check it out. It's super fun. Some people say, oh, that's just teenagers. Not at all. There's lots of people our age on TikTok, and it's a really fun and amusing place. And there's a lot of questionable stuff going on TikTok. So let's bring some adult people bringing some more refined content to the platform. But there's also, people showing you how they renovate a house and how they do certain sports. I'm into golf. I'm trying out for the Maccabiah team to go to Israel next year, but the tryouts are this year. I hope to make the Masters golf team. There's a lot of sports stuff like golf, etc. but especially there's a lot of comedy on TikTok and dance. It's fun. TikTok is fun. So check out TikTok. Follow me on TikTok at YourPalSal613. Good night.